Hello and welcome to the Disc Junkie YouTube channel, where today I'm doing something a bit different. In my first sports video, and specifically baseball video, I will be ranking all 30 MLB teams based on how productive of an offseason they had entering 2026. For most teams, that simply is a measure of how much better they got. Did they address their roster weaknesses? Did they acquire impactful talent to help them win now? For other teams in rebuilds, maybe that means stockpiling exciting young prospects via smart trades. I will be doing this in a tier list format because that's fun, and I will also be ranking every team within their tier. That means a team that's all the way to the left is going to be higher on the tier than a team that's all the way to the right. The tiers are pretty self-explanatory, just want to keep things simple. We will be starting in the American League East and going to the National League West, and I'll be using last year's standings as the order just so things aren't totally random. Last bit of housekeeping is I have these transaction log spreadsheets. They are pulled from the Fangraphs Offseason tracker, which is a super helpful tool. I know it's not the cleanest thing to look at, but graphic design is not my passion, and I wanted some visual aid. I pared down each sheet because there would be more than like 60 rows per team if I didn't. I took some creative liberty in deciding which players were worth mentioning, but all of the most important moves should be highlighted. For free agent signings and extensions, Fangraph doesn't include the dollar amount per contract, which wouldn't really factor into my grade too heavily, but it would be nice to see, so I manually added that into a few places. And then also you have each player's 2025 Fangraphs WAR, which is wins above replacement, or FWAR, as well as their projected 2026 FWAR. Blank box like this usually means player is like a fringe player or a minor league player who isn't getting major league playing time. For contact 0 WAR means they're totally replaceable, and 2 WAR is kind of like average for a full season, so it's like a decent productive contributor. WAR is not a perfect stat. At the end of the day, it's just a complicated guess at a player's value, but it is useful. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about this team right in front of us, the American League representative from last year's World Series, the Toronto Blue Jays, who had a great offseason. The Rogers company got 2 outs away from winning the World Series. They saw that playoff money pouring in, and they started writing checks. They were one of the biggest spenders this winter. Of course, they're a big market team with the backing of an entire country, but they're spending their money, which is what fans want to see. Their pitching depth got lots of love. Huge contract went out to Dylan Cease, one of the best and most dependable free agent starters available. Maybe he'll throw another no-hitter with that stellar Blue Jays defense behind him. Cody Ponds is an interesting sign. He spent the last 3 years playing in Japan and Korea. We'll see how he performs, but at the very least, he should raise the team's floor. Bringing Mad Max back is also great. I just loved his fit in Toronto, and I also loved the Tyler Rogers signing as well as a reliever. His Baseball Savant page is really awesome and funny to look at. His fastball is slower than like 99% of the majors, yet he's still an extremely effective reliever with his submarine delivery. They do lose workhorse Chris Bassett, who signs with the Orioles. That hurts, but I think they've made enough moves to absorb that loss. The Jays are also the latest team to take a swing at the Jesus Sanchez experiment. We'll see how that goes. Kazuma Okamoto is a great position player signing. He's one of the main 3 faces coming over from Japan this year. He profiles as a high floor guy for both offense and defense. He won't be playing shortstop, but he does have big shoes to fill, as the main subtraction from this team is losing Bo Bichette, who signs with the Mets. That loss to me keeps the Jays from entering the top tier, won the offseason, but maybe that's a bit harsh because they did allocate a huge amount of money this offseason. Realistically, they probably could not bring back Bichette if they wanted to, but overall, the offensive in and outs for the team kind of even out, and I really like their additions to the pitching staff, so I will put them at the top of high tier. They made many great moves. Moving on to the Yankees, I've seen fans and analysts kind of all over the spectrum on how they viewed the Yankees offseason. If I were a Yankees fan, I think I would be a bit disappointed. The majority of their moves were really just bringing back guys from last year. Trent Grisham accepted the qualifying offer. They re-signed Belly and Goldie. They bring back a bunch of depth guys like Ahmed Rosario, Ryan Yarbrough, Paul Blackburn. They're really just running it back after getting stomped by the Blue Jays in the ALDS. Contrast this with the crosstown Mets, who we'll get to, but they basically tore down their roster and made huge sweeping moves to bring in new talent, including stealing Luke Weaver and Devin Williams from the Yankees. Is it kind of funny that the Mets keep taking, the scraps from the Yankees dinner table? Sure, but that's neither here nor there, I guess. The Yankees just didn't really make any impact moves. Their biggest acquisition is trading for Ryan Weathers from the Marlins, which I like that. He's a great piece either in the rotation or the bullpen as a long reliever. And you do that because, the team is starting the season without Garrett Cole or Carlos Rodon. They're both on the injured list. But still, man, you're the Yankees. You're one of the financial powerhouses of the league. I know they're a great team. I know they were tied with the Blue Jays for the best record in the American League last year, but it's just a very complacent offseason from a team that has the resources to do way more. This is definitely an underwhelming offseason. Next is the Red Sox, who, for their fans in the last 9 months, they've had a very painful sequence of events. Your star player, Rafael Devers, was surprisingly traded to the Giants in a June blockbuster to make room for Alex Bregman, and then Alex Bregman opts out of his contract and signs with the Cubs. Apparently, the Red Sox did not come financially close and were not willing to give a no-trade clause, which those were the deal breakers. Even with that disaster, though, I think the Red Sox had a pretty good offseason. They were extremely active in the trade market, and I had to declutter this sheet like crazy. If you want to check out the Fangraphs page, there's 84 different rows. There's a lot of information here. They made major improvements on the starting pitching front by bringing in Ranger Suarez and Sonny Gray. Those guys, your 2 and 3 starters behind one of the best pitchers in the league. Garrett Crochet is extremely formidable. They also bring in Johan Oviedo from the Pirates, a nice depth piece. On the position player front, they made another trade with St. Louis to bring in Wilson Contreras as their first baseman. And they bring in Caleb Durbin from the Brewers to probably play third base. Those are some nice impact players for sure. Again, losing Bregman hurts. They actually lost a few notable major leaguers in Steven Matz, Rob Refsnyder, Dustin May, and also Lucas Giolito is still unsigned. You could maybe argue the Red Sox didn't do enough to stay competitive in the gauntlet that is the AL East, but they definitely got better. I will put them in the high tier below the Blue Jays. Next, in 4th place in the AL East last year was the Tampa Bay Rays. This is our first rebuild of the video, and this team was actually even more active than the Red Sox in the trade market. 3-team trade after 3-team trade. If you thought 84 rows was a lot, this team had 104 transactions apparently. They traded Shane Baz to the Orioles for 4 prospects and a competitive balanced draft pick. They traded Brandon Lowe to the Pirates in a 3-team deal involving the Astros that netted them 2 prospects. They trade Josh Lowe and receive Gavin Lux. That one I'm not really sure I get the point of. They lose Pete Fairbanks and Adrian Hauser to free agency, but sign Cedric Mullins, Nick Martinez, and Steven Matz. I guess the value of those free agents in and out kind of cancel each other out. It's more active than other rebuilds we'll see on the list, but it's not the most straightforward. Especially with prospects. This goes for all prospects, but it's extremely difficult in general to quantify their long-term value. It truly takes years to know the return on some of these guys. They did acquire a large number of prospects, which is probably a good thing, and it's realistically very hard for them to compete in the AL East currently. Never mind their relocation and revenue situation. So I think this offseason was at least them going in the overall right direction given their circumstances. I will put them in the mid-tier for now. I think as we move along, we'll see some other team rebuilds are a little bit easier to understand and get behind. Rounding out the AL East, we have the Orioles, who had one of the best off seasons, I think, of any team. They did win 101 games in 2023 and then 91 games in 2024. So to finish last in the division was very disappointing. They're in their contention window right now. They still have time since their high-end prospects are still maturing, but they really stepped on the pedal. Adding Polar Bear Pete Alonso is huge. He's going to give you 35 home runs minimum. And not only that, he's played over 150 games every year since 2019 when he debuted, excluding the pandemic season. That's in addition to Taylor Ward, who they traded for from the Angels. He's been one of their best players for several years at this point. He's another above average bat. They did give up on 4 years of Grayson Rodriguez to make that happen, which to me is sad, mostly because it seems like the O's just think his elbow is totally cooked after surgery. But there's definitely still upside there. It remains to be seen if his best days are ahead of him for sure. They instead replace his upside by bringing in Chris Bassett and also Shane Baz, and they also re-sign Zach Eflin. I especially like the Bassett signing, as that's much more of a proven workhorse veteran type guy to rely on in your rotation. I like the Ryan Helsley signing too. He led the majors in saves in 2024. I know his stint with the Mets last year after the trade deadline was really as horrible as it gets, but you kind of have to believe he'll bounce back. Think of it as a buy low opportunity. The team did trade away a lot of prospects to get Baz and also get Blaze Alexander from the Diamondbacks, but I think that's fine. They've been prospect hugging for way too long anyways. They didn't really lose much major league ready talent. They do lose Tomoyuki Sagano, who signs with the Giants, but he was horrible last year, so that's almost addition by subtraction. Overall, I'd say a fantastic and exciting offseason. Maybe they could have used a traditional frontline starter, but I don't think they really need it. They're one of the teams that won the offseason for sure. Now let us go to the opposite end with the spectrum with the Cleveland Guardians, who, what did they do to defend their AL Central crown this winter? Essentially nothing. one of the least active teams this offseason, and maybe this is the most compact sheet we'll see all video. The biggest new contract they gave out was to reliever Sean Armstrong at 1 year, $5.5 million. No disrespect to Sean Armstrong, but that's just not good enough. Outside of the Rhys Hoskins signing, which is kind of fun, they truly barely did anything to improve their team. They did extend Jose Ramirez. They added an additional 4 years, $165 million to his existing 3-year contract. But I almost feel bad congratulating that because J-Ram is taking a huge discount to have a one jersey career. And despite the franchise being owned by the Dolan family, the same family that owns the New York Knicks, they're consistently a below average payroll team, even though they have the means to spend more. I'm not saying they're a big market team, but they could definitely be doing more than this. Will they be a competitive team in 2026? Probably. But, I mean, this is a pretty pathetic offseason. The J-Ram extension saves this from being the worst. On to the Detroit Tigers, who made a lot of really great moves. I like Kenley Jansen as the closer. He had a really good 2025. He's, not necessarily the most elite closer in the game at this point in his career, but he's still a dog. He's chasing 500 career saves. He can definitely do that this year. Framber is a huge and unexpected acquisition. Much has been said about him and the drama of literally pelting his own catcher, but it remains to be seen how he'll fit into the clubhouse. Manager AJ Hinch can maybe rein him in. Reuniting with Justin Verlander is awesome. 1 year, $13 million with deferrals is really good value for someone, even, at his age, just based on his resume and skill set. That somewhat counters, unfortunately, Reese Olson, missing the year. Also, props to Skubal for winning the arbitration case. I took out basically every other arbitration line from all the other sheets, but I kept the Tarek one in here because, that's a huge one. I also like bringing back Kyle Finnegan. On the pitching side, the Tigers potentially outperformed every other team this offseason, but the key flaw is that they added no offense. They didn't really lose anyone. They got Glaber to accept the qualifying offer, but that's it. They really needed to add at least one impact bat to their lineup, and they did not do that at all. They are set up nicely to win the AL Central, I think, or at least, be competitive and make a deep playoff run, but not adding any offense is really bad. I will still put them in the high tier because they made plenty of great moves, obviously great pitching moves, and that's it. Not as good as the Blue Jays, better than the Red Sox because the Red Sox lost Bregman. On to the Royals. I like basically all of their moves that they made. Not, super flashy ones, but they add Lane Thomas and Isaac Collins in the outfield. Royals actually ranked dead last in outfield F4 last year, so these are definitely upgrades. We will get to the Brewers, but them trading away Isaac Collins is very strange to me still. He was the 4th in the year Rookie of the Year finisher, and they also the Brewers also trade another reliever just to get Angel Zerpa, who's I guess a funky lefty, but he has a career 4 ERA and he has less years of control than Collins, so it's a good trade for the Royals nonetheless. The Royals, speaking of the bullpen, also add Matt Strahm from the Phillies. That's really nice. Outfield depth, they even signed Starling Marte because why not? Based on the vibes, that's cool with me. I love the Michael Garcia extension. He just had by far and away his best major league season at age 25. So it's the perfect time to scoop him up on a long-term deal, team-friendly deal. Salvi extension is great. He deserves to be a one jersey guy. He's awesome. They're bringing in the walls at Kauffman Stadium too to make the outfield smaller and I guess, promote more home runs. For whatever reason, not really relevant to this list, but funny to mention. Mike Yastrzemski and Michael Lorenzen leaving is fine. I'd say overall this is a net positive offseason. I will put them below the Red Sox, but still in the high tier. Oh boy, the Twins. I'm just going to put them at the bottom immediately. They might stay there for the entire video. To fully explain this disaster, we must go back to the 2025 trade deadline. The Pohlad family, who owns the Twins, was exploring the possibility of selling the team. In line with this, they proceeded to have the most outrageous fire sale I think I've ever seen, trading away 11 players. Their Instagram page became a parody as it posted farewell after farewell. This was to get as much contracted money off the books as possible to make it, as easy as possible for a new owner to step in with no long-term obligations. However, after all of that, the Pohlads announced that they would not sell the team, so the bloodbath was for nothing. At this point, it's way too late to turn back. They just need to go full send on the rebuild, which they can't even do because unfortunately Pablo Lopez is getting elbow surgery. He will miss all of 2026. They could maybe trade Joe Ryan, trade Royce Lewis. They probably cannot trade Byron Buxton because he has a no-trade clause. They could have also acquired major league talent to trade away at the deadline on short-term deals, but they did not really do that. I mean, they signed Josh Bell, Victor Caratini, Taylor Rogers. These guys are just, I mean, they're not going to be the most impactful 2026 players. I do think it's funny that Dodgers DFA'd Anthony Bonda because they didn't have enough room for him, and now he immediately potentially becomes the best Twins reliever. That's at least a potential trade chip. But yeah, the Twins are currently in hell. They did, trade all those guys last year, so their farm system is ranked well, but they're going to have a terrible 2026 season. And then finally, the White Sox, they actually had a pretty fun offseason, which their fans deserve since they've really been suffering. Headlined by acquiring the biggest free agent coming from Japan this year in Munetaka Murakami, a guy that hit 56 home runs in 2022, and analysts predicted him to sign for well over $100 million. Instead, it seems the market was concerned about his strikeout potential and lackluster defense, so he only signs for 2 years, $34 million. Obviously, to normal people like you and me, that's a metric fuck ton of money, but compared to, athletes and market value, it's actually a really good, deal for the White Sox. He either balls out and gets traded, or, if he sucks, they're not really taking a huge risk. The White Sox did sell low on Luis Robert Jr., which is usually not good, so they don't get the most interesting prospect haul in return, but they do land Luis Angel Acuña from the Mets, who's at least interesting. Although GM Chris Getz called him a switch hitter when he is not a switch hitter, so hopefully they didn't trade for the wrong guy. They also shed the entirety of Robert's $40 million salary, and they immediately used that money to sign Austin Hayes, and also Sir Anthony Dominguez will probably be their closer. These are some smart moves for sure. They could be valuable trade pieces at the deadline. They also got creative and helped the Red Sox salary dump Jordan Hicks. And by doing that, Boston had to throw in a borderline top 10 prospect in their system in Dave Sandlin, who will probably make his big league debut this year. So that's nice. Will the White Sox be a winning team in 2026? Probably not, but these were smart moves. They're kind of mid-rebuild right now. And hopefully this, winter moves them closer to their contention window, whenever that may be. I will put them, I guess below the Royals, because it's just not as exciting, but high tier. Good moves, smart moves. Actually, I'm going to move them above the Royals. I'm just going to hope that the Murakami signing works out for them. I'm speaking that into existence. Onto the reigning AL West champs, the Seattle Mariners. They had a good winter. They do lose Jorge Polanco and Eugenio Suarez, both of whom had monster offensive seasons, but they do also have currently one of the best farm systems in the majors, so they should have enough young talent to replace those guys internally. They did re-sign Josh Naylor, which is a big deal. They acquired him via trade from the Diamondbacks last July. He's a perfect fit for this team, so I think out of all three of those guys, keeping him is the best. Likely their biggest addition was adding Brendan Donovan from the Cardinals. I really like that move. He's been an above-average hitter every year, but even more valuable than that is his defensive versatility. He's got experience at all 4 infield positions and outfield corners. They did have to trade away the hyped-up switch pitcher prospect Jurangelo St. to make it happen, which is a little sad. I don't love trading away Harry Ford either, one of the best offensive catching prospects in the game. I know he's blocked at the catcher position by Cal Raleigh, but still, that's a guy that's been a top prospect in your system for years. They get Jose Ferrer, who's a decent lefty reliever, out of it from the Nationals. Outside of that, they add Rob Refsnyder on a 1-year deal. He destroys left-handed pitching. The Mariners could have done more, but they did enough to stay competitive in their division. I kind of don't like it as much as any of these other teams in the high tier, but they did more than good enough, so I'll put them in this tier at the very bottom. The Astros had a very interesting offseason. Their main subtraction to work around was losing Framber Valdez to Detroit, as mentioned. Even though Framber has been a premium workhorse going on 5 years now, this is one of the few times where I won't fault a team too much for losing out on a player. Again, that whole fiasco with him pelting his own catcher, he kind of had to leave. With his departure, though, outside of their ace Hunter Brown, the Astros were left with an extremely tenuous starting rotation. To address that, they signed the best Japanese starting pitcher coming from overseas this year in Tatsuya Imai. They also signed Ryan Weiss, who spent 2025 in the Korean League, and they traded for Mike Burrows from the Pirates in a 3-team deal. I'm certainly interested to see how Imai performs stateside. It's unlikely he'll be as good as Framber, so in terms of pure ceiling, the Astros probably got worse. Position player wise, not too much happened. It's funny that they traded for Jesus Sanchez from the Marlins last trade deadline, and then half a season later, they flip him for Joey Loperfido. That's like whatever to me. Not a bad offseason, but not the most exciting either. Good enough? Seems like an accurate question to ask. On to the Rangers. This is a team with a new manager, Skip Schumacher. Doesn't really factor into my, tiering, but I do love Skip, so that's cool. Rangers had a busy offseason, overall a decent one. They took risks and had a lot of bullpen turnover, which you can see, here, and then all these contracts they had to give out. Their biggest move was trading 5 of their prospects to get Mackenzie Gore from the Nationals. This is a move that could age horribly. First off, Gore, yeah, he's a young, controllable arm with upside, but he's still yet to have a true breakout season. His career ERA plus is 98, so just slightly below average. Plus, he has a bad habit of performing worse in the second half. And then to top it off, depending on what prospect ranking you were looking at, all 5 of the guys they traded were in the Rangers' top 20 prospects. And then they did all of that while letting Merrill Kelly and Tyler Mahle, just walk in free agency. I feel like those are guys that are like at least somewhat equitable in value to Mackenzie Gore. I guess, if you're strapped for cash, you got to turn to the trade market, but I don't know, this Mackenzie Gore really has to show up for them or this is going to hurt. A trade that I did like for them was trading away Marcus Semien to the Mets for Brandon Nimmo. I guess it's, a downgrade defensively for an upgrade offensively, although Nimmo is a couple years younger. Releasing Adolis Garcia and Jonah Heim just hurts for the vibes. Those two were integral pieces of their World Series win. Just letting them go for nothing is pretty sad. They do get Denny Jansen. I hope he, is an upgrade for them at catcher. In a very winnable division, the Rangers could have done better to improve their chances heading into the year. In fact, I don't even know if the parts in are better than the parts out, but they did make some win-now moves, which I'll generally root for. I think I like it a little bit less than the Astros offseason, so I'll put them right there, right in the middle. Moving on to the Oakland Athletics. I know they are currently playing in Sacramento and they will be moving to Vegas, but I will call them the Oakland A's for now because fuck John Fisher. Some pitching moves. They add Scott Barlow. They add Mark Leiter Jr. to their bullpen. I don't think either of those guys are needle movers. No disrespect. They add Aaron Savali, who's just going to eat innings for them. Pitching was far and away their worst weakness in 2025, and they did not really address that at all. Trading for Jeff McNeil from the Mets is interesting. I mean, he had a surprisingly nice 2025. Plus, it's nice the Mets are covering some of his contract. He's a solid second baseman. The thing that saves this offseason from being like a total wash is the fact that they extended both Tyler Soderstrom and Jacob Wilson on extremely team-friendly deals, both long-term 7-year deals. So they have a great young core and a lineup that can definitely do damage. It sucks that they waited till after leaving Oakland to do all this. Still overall a pretty middling offseason. Their rotation last year was terrible. It's probably still going to be terrible since they're still playing in a minor league ballpark. But at least they're not projected to finish last in the division, according to most analysts. I think I'm going to put them, I have to put them below the Rays. And then unfortunately, the team that finished last and is probably going to finish last in the division again is the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. They certainly had a very active offseason, including new manager and former backstop Kirk Suzuki. But they probably took, I think they definitely took the most risky flyers of any team. First off, they lose a bit of talent in Kenley Jansen and Luis Rengifo. Those are two guys that they probably could have traded, but instead they just walk for nothing. They, as we discussed, traded Taylor Ward to the Orioles for Grayson Rodriguez. This we really have to see how Grayson, bounces back. It's kind of like a low risk, high reward type deal because Taylor Ward only has 1 year left on his contract and Grayson has 4 years left. But again, maybe his elbow is cooked. Who really knows at this point? On the topic of uncertainty, the Angels picked up a whole host of pitchers at, low points in their career. Alek Manoah, Jordan Romano, Kirby Yates. Will one of them have a great season and be a valuable trade chip? Hopefully, but will all of them? I kind of doubt it. At the very least, buying out the Rendon contract is a moral victory, and also Drew Pomerantz had a really good year with the Cubs, so I like that move. Josh Lowe, that's probably the most surefire move they made, and I do like him in the outfield. They continue the Yoan Moncada experiment by signing him to another 1-year deal. It's definitely not the most reassuring offseason. If anything, a true grade is contingent on some of their gambles paying off and the team flipping those contracts for prospects, but historically the Angels have not been sellers at recent trade deadlines because Artie Moreno is an idiot. So I'm also going to put them at the bottom of the middle tier. They did make a lot of moves, so, at least they're not being passive. I'll reward them for that. On to the National League, and we will start with the Phillies, the NL East champs. Unfortunately, it kind of feels like they've kept this team together for a little too long. I can't discount, re-signing Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto, but it's kind of like the Yankees. Those are moves they had to, make in order to bare minimum run it back. And running back 2025 means winning one playoff game for them. Losing Ranger Suarez really hurts. I know, 157 innings pitched in 2025 is his career best, but he is a beast in the postseason, which is the ultimate goal. They lose Matt Strahm to the Royals, but essentially replace him with Brad Keller, so I think that evens out. I actually really like the Adolis Garcia flyer. That's, of course, the ALCS MVP in 2023. He has been a below-league average hitter for the past 2 years, but hopefully a change of scenery can reignite him. And I do think it is an upgrade over Nick Castellanos, who they released, which is kind of funny. He really is not a productive baseball player at this point in his career, but I'm sure he holds a special place in a lot of the hearts of Phillies fans. I know this team has won the NL East 2 years in a row, but I just don't feel great about them doing it again. I do really like the Christopher Sanchez and Jesus Luzardo extensions, though. I think those moves, for me, save this from being an underwhelming offseason. Okay, now I'm just starting to throw a bunch of teams in this middle tier here. The Rays one is still so confusing to me. The Rangers one, I really don't know. Ranger Suarez is probably the best player that left either of these teams, so by that logic, I'm just going to keep the Phillies here. Okay, it does not get any easier to untangle here, as now we have the New York Mets, who had probably the most active and definitely the most hectic offseason. I trimmed as much fat as I could and still got to shrink the font to squeeze all this into one page. They lost many players via free agency, including their franchise home run leader in Pete Alonso. They also lose, arguably the best closer in all of baseball in Edwin Diaz. He signs with the Dodgers. They also traded away longtime tenured players in Jeff McNeil and Brandon Nimmo, who we've talked about, going to the A's and the Rangers. They did all of that to make room for a bunch of new names. Freddie Peralta, Luis Robert Jr., Bo Bichette, Luke Weaver, Jorge Polanco, Devin Williams, Marcus Semien. I know they weren't going deep in the playoffs with their previous roster, so, some changes were needed, but this is kind of crazy. Letting Pete Alonso walk still does not sit well with me, but again, they acquired a lot of talent. Bo Bichette is an elite contact bat, and blocking him for the Phillies, kind of has to feel good for Mets fans. Although he'll be playing third base for the first time in his major league career, so we'll have to see how that goes. They also signed Jorge Polanco, who had a great 2025 offensive season, but he will be playing first base for not the first time, but he barely has any experience in the majors doing that. So again, these are good players, but the roster construction doesn't really make sense necessarily. I do like buying low on Luis Robert in their trade with the White Sox. In 2023, he hit 38 home runs, finished 12th in MVP voting. He has unfortunately been a well below league average hitter the past 2 years, but maybe chasing a playoff spot instead of losing 121 games will do better for his mindset. Last thing I'll touch on is the Freddie Peralta trade. It's tough for the Brewers, who we'll get to soon, but they trade, their ace again after trading Corbin Burns from the Mets. It's a great move. They also even somehow pick up Tobias Myers, who has high upside. They did give up 2 prospects in the back half of Baseball America's top 100 prospect list in Brandon Sproat and Jet Williams. It's a win-now move, but of course it comes at a cost. In the end, I'm still sort of on the fence. The Mets definitely did an admirable job salvaging a nightmare beginning to the offseason, but there's still kind of just too many red flags for me to put them in the highest tier. So I will slot them. I think they had a better offseason than the Tigers, but not as good as the Blue Jays. So right here, one of the best for sure. On to the Marlins. The poor Marlins fans, they have only seen their team play above 500 in 2 seasons since 2009 and are in the midst of another rebuild. Did this recent offseason bring them closer to their next playoff chase? Probably not in the immediate future. Their biggest moves this winter were selling 2 of their young controllable starters in Edward Cabrera to the Cubs and Ryan Weathers to the Yankees. Both starters combined have only eclipsed the 100-inning mark once, yet in return they netted 7 prospects, including top 100 prospect Owen Casey, who is slotted to get some outfield run for them. There he is in this coming season. The Marlins then bolstered their depleted starting pitching depth by signing Chris Paddock. They also signed Pete Fairbanks and Christopher Morel from the Rays. All these signings they could potentially flip at the trade deadline. This team was certainly active. I removed all minor league signings from this list, and still it's just a bunch of trades and waiver claims and losses. In concept, they're doing the right thing for a rebuilding team, which is letting their young guys play, and as soon as any of them shown any inkling of, appeal, they sell them. Maybe it would also help to take a page out of the Angels book and, sign some more major league ready talent now, at least to give some fans something to, come to the ballpark for. They made some smart moves. It kind of stinks that they're going to tack on probably another losing season, but I will put them at the top of this middle tier. Yeah, that feels about right. Onto the Braves, who seem a little cursed with their injury and other off-the-field antics-related luck, but they did have a good winter. They picked up probably the second best reliever on the market in Robert Suarez from the Padres, and Raciel Iglesias entered free agency, but they re-signed him. So that's awesome. They have, the best 8 and 9 inning reliever guys, maybe in the whole majors. They re-signed Ha-Seong Kim, which I love, although unfortunately, the Braves injury luck, he slipped on ice in South Korea and broke his hand. So he's going to be out until May, which is not that long, but, that hurts. The deal itself, though, I do like. They traded Nick Allen to the Astros for Mauricio Dubon, so slightly downgrading in defense for an upgrade in offense. They also signed Jorge Mateo after, I think, the Ha-Seong Kim injury, so, another shortstop depth piece. All of this is to say the shortstop position continues to just be a black hole for them ever since the departure of Dansby Swanson. Losing Marcell Ozuna also hurts. He is no longer of the Braves. I know his 2025 was not the most productive year, and I know he's going to be a 35-year-old DH. But now with the news of Jurickson Profar missing the entire year due to being popped for PEDs for the second time, you kind of wish Ozuna was still around. They might have signed Mike Yastrzemski as a lefty outfield bench piece or platoon piece, but they're going to need to lean on him a lot more now. Working within their circumstances, though, I do think the Braves made some good offseason moves. I'm going to add them to the top tier. I think I'll put them above the Royals because Robert Suarez is better than any piece that the Royals added. And onto the Nationals, who are in hell. It seems like they danced with the devil to win that 2019 World Series because ever since then they've been below 500. They've been in a rebuild, which has basically stalled, and they're probably headed into another rebuild. Off the field, they bring in new manager Blake Butera, as well as a new general manager and a new head of baseball ops. So they're clearly in a period of, hey, we got to try something different. We talked about the Mackenzie Gore trade, which I mentioned Texas shipped away a really sizable prospect haul. So I do like this for the Nationals. I also mentioned I like the Harry Ford trade for the Nationals because that's a lot for the Mariners to give up just for Jose Ferrer, the reliever. In terms of free agent signings, they bring in a few starting pitchers. They sign Miles Michaelis, who is basically just going to eat innings for them. They bring in Foster Griffin, who spent the last 3 years in Japan. So it's interesting. It's always interesting to see how those guys perform when coming back stateside. And then I like the Zach Littell signing. He's been sneaky, really productive reliever for the past 2 years, or starter, for the past 2 years. At this point, I'd kind of wish they would just trade CJ Abrams too. I know he's got 3 years of control left, so he's probably too expensive for teams to bite on right now, but this team is headed nowhere. They've spent the last several years rebuilding, and now they're probably going to lose another 90 games. Similar to the Marlins, I guess. I really think that Mackenzie Gore trade is kind of a fleece, so I'm gonna even put them above them. On to the NL Central with the Milwaukee Brewers, who were very active in the trade market this winter. Their biggest subtraction is definitely losing Freddie Peralta. That's painful, but I guess it's just how the team operates. He's coming off his best year, first time receiving Cy Young votes, although 2026 is his last arbitration year before free agency. They do get a really nice prospect package from the Mets in return. Brandon Sproat and Jet Williams will likely get some run from the team in 2026. They also extend the qualifying offer to Brandon Woodruff, which they probably needed to do with the departure of Peralta. And this one's strange to me. They traded Caleb Durbin and Isaac Collins, who finished 3rd and 4th in Rookie of the Year voting in 2025, the year that just ended. I guess they're both a little bit older, and maybe you can say the Brewers are selling high. Again, I don't love the Angel Zerpa trade from the Royals because he has less years of control than Collins, and he's just been an average pitcher for the past 3 years. I know the Brewers have some kind of voodoo magic pitching lab, so maybe they think they can unlock something more, but I don't know. I do really like the Luis Rengifo signing. I've liked him on the Angels for a while, but overall, pretty underwhelming offseason for sure. Better than the Yankees, I guess, but the Brewers fans definitely have to be a little nervous. The Cubs are right on their tail, who we're going to talk about now. One of the most active off seasons and overall a great one. They did have a lot of players leave their team, especially relievers. They had like a whole reliever turnover, so they had to sign a bunch of new guys. It's really hard to compare, in and out, before and after with bullpens just because there's so much volatility year to year. So I guess we'll just consider that a wash. Their biggest add, though, was signing Alex Bregman to a 5-year deal, $175 million. That's definitely a sizable chunk of change, but Chicago is a big market, so it's cool to see them spending money. Plus, Bregman is the whole package. Great bat, great defense, great clubhouse leader. He definitely improves the team in their win now contention window. Trading for Edward Cabrera from the Marlins is a ballsy move. He still has 3 years control left on his contract, but also 2025 was his career high in innings pitched at only 137, so it remains to be seen how much he'll truly contribute to their rotation. He certainly possesses very enticing upside. The thing that is keeping this offseason from being great to me is losing Kyle Tucker, which that whole saga is very strange to me. They do replace him with another former Astro in Bregman, but I do think that's a downgrade. And what's strange about it is last year they traded for Kyle Tucker from the Astros by giving up the 14th overall pick, Cam Smith, who looks like he's going to be really good. And then it doesn't even really seem like they were ever interested in re-signing Kyle Tucker. So they just give up, one of their top prospects for nothing. And then they sign another guy who's a downgrade. Even with all that, though, I do think it's a really good offseason. I don't think it's the best, but it's definitely enough for them to vie for the NL Central crown. I guess I will put them in the team above the team that they stole Alex Bregman from. That makes sense to me. The Cincinnati Reds, their big fish of the offseason is reuniting with Eugenio Suarez on a very cheap $15 million 1-year deal with a mutual option toward 2027. This dude hit 49 home runs last year, and now he's going to play at Great American Small Park, where he also previously hit 49 home runs. The Reds desperately needed lineup help, and he gives them that. They re-signed Emilio Pagan, who had an awesome year. They added a bit of outfield depth in J.J. Bleday and Dane Myers. But their losses are sizable. They lose several position player contributors in Miguel Andujar, Austin Hayes, Gavin Lux. Again, that 3-team trade with the Angels and Rays, I still don't really know how to make heads or tails of. They also lose a fair bit of starting pitching depth as well, though. They lose Nick Martinez and Zach Littell. And it sucks that Hunter Green, their ace, is injured to start the season. So really, this is like a question of can Gino replace all of the value lost by himself? He strikes out a ton, and he isn't a great defender, so he better hit a lot of long balls. Overall, I think it's a bit of a wash. I would have liked to see the Reds do more, given their division is not that competitive. They didn't take as much of a risk as the Rangers did with the Gore trade, but I just like the pitchers the Astros added, so I think right in the middle here is fine. Onto the Cardinals, who I think they had a pretty good offseason given the context, because they've clearly identified they are not in a contention window. It is time to rebuild, so it's time to trade away veterans, and they're even sending cash to help the receiving teams pay for the offloaded contracts. They're paying for $31 million of Arenado's remaining $42 million contract to the Diamondbacks, $20 million and another $8 million to Boston for Sonny DeGray and Wilson Contreras, respectively. Of course, by doing this, they receive more favorable prospect packages in return. I know these moves are painful. I know it's a shame to see the Redbirds not competitive, but rebuilds are an inevitable part of the sports life cycle. They do receive the exciting switch pitcher Durangelo St. John from the Mariners for Brendan Donovan. I also like replacing Miles Mikolas with Dustin May. Both starters had pretty bad 2025s, but I think May has more upside. The problem, which I guess is kind of unavoidable at this point, is they should have done all of this last year. 2025 was like a wasted season for them because they weren't competitive and they retained all of these guys, and they just became less valuable because they got a year older and have a less year of contract on their control. All those guys, though, I'm talking about Wilson, Sonny Gray, and Nolan Arenado, they had no trade clauses, so I guess they didn't want to leave until it was painfully clear that the contention window is over, which is, it is what it is now. Overall, considering the hand they were dealt, I think it was a very productive offseason. There is a clear and sensible plan. The moves were well aligned with that plan. I think it's my favorite rebuild of any of the teams this offseason. So somewhere in the high tier comfortably. I guess I'll put them above the White Sox because, like, the White Sox, they made fun moves, but they're not really going to be competitive. The Red Sox are actually going to be competitive, so it's kind of a vibes. I mean, tier lists are vibes placements anyways. Who cares? Onto the Pirates, who truly have elite top-end pitching talent. So this winter, Pittsburgh had a clear need to improve their lineup, and they surprisingly actually did that. They signed Ryan O'Hearn, who's been a well above league average bat for the past 3 years. They signed him to a 2-year contract, which this is crazy. This is the first multi-year contract the Pirates have given out in 10 years, but better late than never, I guess. Brandon Lowe has been above average bat his entire career. Marcell Ozuna, no longer of the Braves, but he slots in as one of the team's best bats. Since pitching is their strong suit, they actually traded from a position of strength. They deal away Johan Oviedo to the Red Sox for Jose Tinson Garcia, otherwise known as the Password, because that's a very difficult name to pronounce on, first glance. Oviedo has less years of control, but is more proven, whereas Garcia was just blocked by the Red Sox outfield logjam. So the Red Sox kind of had to trade him. It's actually a really good trade to get something out of nothing. So we'll see if, him getting regular playing time with the Pirates serves him well. And then lastly, losing McCutchen to the Rangers on a minor league deal is, that kind of stinks. I know Kutch has already played for other teams. I guess it's mostly whatever. This team isn't necessarily going to compete for a wild card spot, but I do like the direction they moved in. I think the Royals just addressed their needs more cleanly. But the Pirates also address their needs more cleanly than the Mariners. So those three are there. And then on to our last division. This one is probably going to be the most straightforward of all the teams. The Dodgers, I'm just going to put them on the very top of the list right now. Doesn't get much easier than that. I mean, I'm a Shohei Glazer, but fans have to agree this was like the best offseason by any team. The back-to-back champs had 2 weak points entering the 2026 season. They needed to add an outfielder. They needed bullpen help, so they added the best position player available in Kyle Tucker and the best closer available in Edwin Diaz, both on like ridiculous, extremely expensive deals, high, average annual value deals. Probably they're the only team that can, even do this. So maybe the next collective bargaining agreement will change how they can operate. But for now, it's basically a dream offseason. They also bring back, fan favorites and Kike Hernandez, World Series hero Miguel Rojas. They give a really team-friendly extension to Max Muncy because he wants to finish his career here. I mean, yeah, we don't have to spend too much time on this one. So on to the Padres. I know I'm, repping the Dodgers gear over there. So Padres fans probably do not care what I have to say, but I do think it's fun when the Padres and the Dodgers are both competitive. It just makes for awesome drama when they're trying to knock each other out. Unfortunately, the Padres are in a weird limbo right now with ownership and spending, so their biggest move was re-signing Michael King, which is great. He is nasty. Any team would love to have him. But they do also lose Dylan Cease, one of the best starters on the market, one of the most reliable for sure the past 5 years. They lose one of the best closers in Robert Suarez. And then similar to the Angels, they just took like a lot of flyers on guys. Nick Castellanos, Miguel Andujar, Griffin Canning, Walker Buehler. I think, at least one of those guys will have a great year, but it's not likely that all of them will have a great year. They signed Sungmun Song from the Korean Baseball League to a pretty sizable 4-year deal, and interested to see how he'll perform. They enter the year with a new manager, Craig Stammen. Not relevant for the ranking, but just wanted to shout that out. I know gunning for the NL West title will be tough, but they did make the wild card round last year, so they were in a competitive position. But they just got worse this winter. They lost too much top-end talent that they didn't replace. Compared to the Angels, they did take less risky flyers, in my opinion, but the Angels didn't lose Dylan Cease and Robert Suarez. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to put them... I don't think their moves are even as... I think I'll put them above the Brewers because both teams had underwhelming off seasons, but the Padres, at least given their ownership situation, is a little more understandable. Another team that operated in the margins is the San Francisco Giants. They signed some undervalued players, also another NL West team with a new manager signing Tony Vitello, who previously has experience with the NCAA Tennessee Volunteers. He has no experience coaching in the major leagues, so plenty of eyes will be on him to see how that experiment goes. In terms of on-field product, I like the additions of Adrian Hauser and Tyler Mahle. Combined, they feel like enough to replace the loss of Justin Verlander, who goes back to Detroit. The Luis Arraez signing is interesting. He, as a free agent, he specifically sought out a team that would let him keep playing second base, even though metrically he's a horrible defender there. But his bat-to-ball skills are the best in the majors, so he can definitely provide value in the right context. Harrison Bader had a great 2025 season with the stick, but his underlying metrics were largely below average and in line with his previous season, so he's a major regression candidate. At least he takes over at center field because he's elite with the glove and he pushes Jung-Hoo Lee to right field. Outfield defense was definitely a major need for the Giants. In comparison with the Padres, the Giants lost a lot less talent, and I think their additions do overall make them a little bit better going into the next season. Definitely good enough with a question mark. The loss of talent really, I think, is doing a lot of lifting for them here, because they only just like net got better a little bit. Yeah, the top of this middle tier feels fine to me. I think they have the best shot to get second in the NL West of the Padres and Diamondbacks. Speaking of the Diamondbacks, they had an okay offseason. Not the flashiest moves, but kind of high floor moves. One of their major moves is trading for Nolan Arenado, whose offense has steadily declined for the past 4 years. He'll give you a great glove for sure, but then you also sign Carlos Santana to play first base for you, and the lineup outside of their top three is just not that intimidating. They are at least receiving $31 million from the Cardinals to cover Arenado's contract, so that's kind of nice. They're not really paying for much. Zach Gallen rejecting the qualifying offer just to accept a 1-year deal for the exact same amount of money with deferrals is kind of hilarious. He had a pretty bad 2025, most likely his worst season in the majors thus far, but hopefully the Milkman can bounce back. They also bring back Merrill Kelly. He's not bad, and it's nice you flipped him at the 2025 deadline for a few pitching prospects, and then you just get him back anyways. These moves, to me, just don't make the team that much better. I don't think they got that much worse, since they barely lost any MLB talent outside of trading away Blaise Alexander and Jake McCarthy. I think somewhere towards the bottom of the middle tier. Oh man, the Rays one is just still so confusing to me. I think below the Phillies is fine. Also, why was Ketel Marte in trade rumors? He's like the best second baseman in the majors by far. And he has like 5 years of control in his contract. That never made any sense to me. And then the Rockies, sorry to end on a low note, but I will be putting them in this nothing really matters tier, because that is like, the Rockies' existence is textbook nothing really matters. At the very least, they did make some fun moves. Tomoyuki Sagano was horrible last year with the Orioles. He gave up 33 home runs, which led the American League, and now he's going to pitch in, Coors, so it's going to get even worse potentially, but I'm always going to root for the Asian ball players, for better or worse. The Michael Lorenzen signing is fun. If only in hopes that they give him some at-bats and let him be a two-way player, at least a little. Quintana on a 1-year deal, Willie Castro on a 2-year deal. At least these are short-term signings, so they could become trade fodder at the deadline. Also, Edward Julian and Jake McCarthy, probably one of these guys can at least get hot long enough for them to be a little valuable. But yeah, again, just textbook nothing really matters for the Rockies. They did gut their front office and bring in a lot of fresh faces to run baseball operations, including new manager Warren Schaefer. And hopefully moving forward, we'll actually see some sort of plan or strategy from this team. But that is the tier list. I wanted a normal distribution, which I didn't really get. If you watched to the end, thank you so much for tuning in. Please leave a like, subscribe if you are interested in seeing more. And, thank you so much for the support. Feel free to comment too. I mean, I don't think I need to ask. You guys will definitely flame me if I got something wrong. Let me know if, you think I should have changed anything in terms of presentation, the spreadsheet thing. I know it's a little bit clunky to look at, but that's the best I could think of. And, baseball in general is a nerdy sport. So looking at Excel spreadsheets, what better way to, talk about ball than doing that. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. Maybe I'll do some more sports content in the future. But hope you have a good rest of your day. See ya.